In today's video, we're going to be discussing one of, if not the strangest cryptid encounters I've ever really come across. I really feel like this is England's forgotten cryptid encounter because I have really not seen this covered a whole lot. Obviously, you have a lot of cryptids like the Mothman, and you have, of course, like Bigfoot and things like that. But this story is just so strange with so many weird details. It just feels so odd. That's the best word I can use to describe it. And you guys will quickly understand what I mean by that as the story goes on. This is the first video on this channel. I like to continue doing these cryptid style videos and cover a lot of other mysteries and things like this. If you guys have any suggestions for future videos, make sure to comment those down below. I would appreciate all the recommendations there. But for the story of Sam the Sandown Clown, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. So in May of 1973, in the Lake Common area in Sandown, two kids were out around a wooded / swampy area, and this is basically their story. Now, before I start, I would like to say that this entire encounter is listed in a journal, so I do encourage you guys, if you'd like to read the entire thing and everything that has to offer, I encourage you guys to look that up. I'll have a link in the description though. I'm sure I'll be able to find it. I've already used it a few times just in the research for this video. But I will be using some excerpts from that for a few of the descriptions and other things like that. But to get into this video, it was May of 1973 when two kids, a boy and a girl. The boy was not given a name, so we're just going to refer to him as John. The girl's name is Faye. They were both near a swampy / wooded area when they walked across a footbridge and heard a strange wailing noise. And after they walked across this footbridge, a weird blue hand came out from under the bridge. And I'm going to read this excerpt from the journal for this part. It says, "A blue-gloved hand appeared from under the bridge and a strange figure emerged. The figure fumbled with a book, dropped it in the water, then splashed about to retrieve it. The two kids then watched the figure enter a metallic hut, similar to those used on building sites, except that it had no windows. It moved along with a strange, hopping motion with knees raised high." Now, obviously, first impressions, it's very odd, not much to really make of it. And again, that is not even close to how weird this really gets. So to get back into the story, after the kids see this figure go into the hut, about 50 yards away, the figure appeared again. And this time he was carrying, quote unquote, a black knobbed microphone with a white flex attached. So at this point, this figure comes out from under the bridge. There's a weird wailing noise that sounds similar to that of an ambulance. The kids are obviously very confused. They're a little afraid. And then the figure goes into a hut. And when it returns, it's holding a microphone. So again, just very strange to start out here. And it's about to get a lot weirder. So apparently the kids say that at this point, they kind of walked closer to the figure when they heard it call out, "Hello, are you still there?" after the kids had turned around. So when the kids walked back over, this is the description they gave, and this is once again from the journal that I referenced earlier. It says he was nearly 7 feet tall and had no neck, for his head appeared to be wedged straight onto his shoulders. He wore a yellow pointed hat which interlocked with the red collar of a green tunic. A round black knob was affixed to the top of his head, and wooden-like antennas were attached to either side. The face had triangular markings for eyes, a brown square of a nose, and motionless yellow lips. Other round markings were on his paper-white cheeks, and a fringe of red hair fell onto his forehead. Wooden slats protruded from his sleeves and from below his white trousers. Upon seeing this, the kids, for a reason I'm not quite sure, decided to go even closer to a figure that looked like this. And when they did, the figure pulled out a notebook and wrote in large letters, quote unquote, "Hello, and I am all colors Sam." And something of note is that despite the verbal, things it was saying, like, "Hello, are you still there?" Despite all of that, his lips did not move when it made those noises. It just kind of came out, whether it was the microphone, it's not super clear, but the lips never moved from Sam. So once the kids started talking to Sam, they basically just began asking him some questions. They asked him about his ripped up clothes, and Sam replied, saying that they were the only clothes he owned. They asked him about the whiteness of his skin, if he was really a man, to which he replied no. The kids even asked him if he was a ghost, to which Sam replied, "Well, not really, but I am, in an odd sort of way." The children asked him, "What are you then?" And he replied with a vague, "You know." So, again, at this point in the story, it really hasn't gone anywhere that seems to give us or anyone clues as to what this really may have been. And at the end of the video, we are going to go over theories. So make sure to stay for the end. We're going to talk over a lot of theories because people have, I think they're all over the spectrum when it comes to what they think this was, whether it was authentic, whether it was, supernatural, whether it was a person. We'll get to all that in a little bit. Continuing the story, though, Sam essentially tells the kids that there are other Sams, and he even drew a picture of what another Sam would have looked like. So again, not sure if a name was really given for what this, race or species of people or whatever he is called, but I guess there are allegedly more, and Sam does end up telling the kids at some point that he's actually quite frightened of humans, and that if it got to the point where he was ever even attacked, he really wouldn't even fight back, which I think is an interesting detail to add because it kind of tells you a little bit about the nature of this thing. So at this point, the kids were then invited into the metallic hut that was referenced earlier, and so they go in with Sam, to which he removes his hat, and they see he has a very round face, white ears, and sparse brown hair. It also begins to describe the hut itself, with the bottom floor being well papered in blue-green and covered with a pattern of dials, an electric heater, and wooden furniture that was described as simple. Now, this whole story is very strange with a lot of very weird details, but I have to include this next part just because it's just so bizarre. So apparently at a certain point, Sam was showing the kids his diet and how he eats berries. And so this excerpt from the journal says that before eating a berry, Sam performed an odd quote-unquote conjuring trick. He placed the berry in his ear, thrust his head forward, and caused the berry to disappear and reappear at one of his eyes. Repeating the process, the berry traveled to his mouth. Again, just very bizarre that this is all that's even gotten to this point where these kids followed this random figure that looks as strange as he allegedly did to this hut, and they're just kind of having a conversation for about a half hour, and he's showing them how he eats berries and what he eats, and he even at one point alludes to having a camp somewhere else on the island. It doesn't exactly specify as to where, but again, he just seems kind of like an open book and very friendly to these kids. So at a certain point, the kids did decide to end their interaction with this very strange figure, being what everyone referred to Sam as. And so they leave, and they do tell the first person they saw, which was a man, what they saw, which of course he does not believe them. I think the kids actually described Sam as a ghost to the man, and the man completely dismisses it. And so this is another point where the story takes another turn. So the kids then go to their father, and the daughter actually tells her father everything that the kids saw. And what was really strange is that the father honestly kind of believed them. Apparently, it says a particular detail about how the girl described Sam having 3 fingers and 3 toes on each hand and foot. I guess was what kind of made the dad feel like that detail would be very weird for the kids to make up. But in my opinion, kids have crazy imagination. That doesn't seem like that part of the story was what stood out, at least to me, that he had 3 fingers and 3 toes, or 3 toes and 3 fingers. Yeah, so that wouldn't really stick out to me. The whole berry thing would, and the fact that this thing is like 7 feet tall and crawling up under a bridge. But apparently, the fingers and toes was what the dad finally was fully convinced about. However, it may seem kind of weird to a lot of you that this dad would just blindly believe his, 2 kids that were around the age of 7 or 8, because this story sounds completely fictional, completely made up. So why would a dad believe this? Well, to actually understand that, we have to go back 3 years earlier to October of 1970, when their father was actually driving. He allegedly saw a large multi-lit aircraft flying near him when he was driving home. So apparently he pulled over to observe the craft and noted that a wide ring of 7 or more lights could be seen, each of them a large and clearly defined sphere like a bright red cherry, and interspersed with a turquoise and white light. No sound could be heard. And so I guess after this, the father gets back into his car and eventually keeps driving, and the weird aircraft continues to follow him. It got to even be around 300 yards behind his car while rotating slowly, while he continued to drive. It says the aircraft continued to follow him, and when he reached its destination, a friend also witnessed this object behind the car until eventually it did go out of sight. And then apparently 2 years later, while cliffside, the father also saw more lights. This time they were 40 feet away from him in the water, quote unquote, peering up at me like the eyes of some horrible sea monster. So hopefully that context maybe adds a bit more to why the dad eventually thought, maybe there is something to this alleged encounter that my kids had, because I've seen these weird UFO-like ships around and all this other strange stuff. It seems like that was probably what led him to think maybe this could be true. Maybe there is something to this. Without those personal experiences, personally, to me, I don't think that dad would have been as open to believing this story, but he was. And the final excerpt from this journal that I will read says, and this is the father speaking, it says, "I get the impression that my daughter was somehow taken into a bubble of alien reality created by this strange person. He told them he had just made the hut. Also, my daughter told me that while they were talking to this quote-unquote ghost, two workmen nearby were repairing a post. They paid no attention to the weird charade, as though they could not see it." So again, this kind of implies that there were other people around this, at least at around a similar time, yet either couldn't see Sam or were maybe not able to see the kids either. Maybe they just saw this and had no idea to think. There's really no telling. But again, I did think it was pretty notable to at least add this in. So that's essentially the story of the Sandown clown encounter. However, there are a lot of theories to go over. So I want to start with just the first one, and a very popular one, and it's not the most fun one, but it is a theory that this is just not true. It's just a hoax. Now, for this theory, there are a few different avenues you can go for. So first off, this story could be completely made up, and we can say that these kids did go out there, but they were just playing around. They were being kids. This is all their imagination. They go back, they tell their dad. Maybe their dad really did have those weird experiences, and he just kind of believed the story, and it went from there. Or you could say maybe these kids did see something weird. Maybe it was just a oddly dressed person, and their imagination took over, and everything they said they did truly believe they saw. It was just, their imagination. It could have also been that somewhere down the line, maybe the story was just straight up made up. Maybe it never had any sort of evidence to it in the first place, and just somewhere down the line it was read to somebody, or maybe it was written down and it just kind of took off from there. There's really no telling. Something I also want to say that kind of lends credence to this hoax theory is that the primary source of this alleged encounter is the British UFO Research Association, which was founded in 1964. So I'm not going to say that means this isn't true or this is true, but just so we're all on the same page, that really is the main source of information we have for this entire encounter. The second theory we're going to talk about is a shared hallucination. Personally, I don't really believe this one. I would think it's more just the kid's imagination kind of going along with the story and it kind of going from there. But some people really do believe it could have been a shared hallucination. This phenomenon is called folie à deux, which is when two people can share a psychosis episode. Basically, they can see the same thing even though it's really not there. So there's not really a way of knowing for sure if the kids would have even been in the mental state to where this phenomenon could even happen to them, really. So personally, I don't really believe this one as much, but it is a theory out there that people have brought up, and I do think it's worth noting that maybe it was something that the kids really did think they saw that just wasn't real, and that's why the people that were repairing that post never acknowledged it, because no one else saw it. Another theory, and in my opinion this one is honestly the creepiest, is that Sam was actually just a human, and that he had certain deformities that made him look a certain way. Maybe it was just the kids drumming up this whole thing, and he was in reality just kind of dressed weird, and the kids took it from there and made all these other crazy, fantastical details about him. The reason I see this as so creepy, though, is that if this is true, it really means the kids were with a complete stranger in the woods in the middle of nowhere, that they went into his hut and talked to him for a long time, and though obviously allegedly nothing malicious happened, it's still very creepy to think what could have happened if Sam really was a person, because I think in that perspective, it makes everything a lot stranger since he was being so friendly to kids that were very clearly alone. I think this is a possible theory. I think it is kind of under the same umbrella as the kids seeing something that was there, which is not how they end up describing it because, they're kids and that kind of thing happens. Now, another theory is that Sam was an alien. Now, this kind of also plays into the dad having his own paranormal experiences, in the years prior, seeing this alleged alien aircraft, these weird lights in the water that were around him, and things of that nature. So again, maybe there's something to this. Again, if we're gonna believe this encounter, the dad's personal experiences were so strange. He was willing to believe this story from his kids. That sounds just totally odd. I mean, it's just such a weird story with so many weird details, but he was willing to believe it because his experiences were so strong that he had just seen these alien aircrafts and all these paranormal sightings around this town. So maybe Sam was an alien. Maybe he was some sort of weird, paranormal being that was just kind of tied into the other UFO sightings. Again, this was published in a UFO journal, so I'm sure that perspective is probably, I don't want to say pushed a certain way, but again, that'd probably be the author's favorite if you would think that this is from a UFO journal. But still, anything's really possible at this point. There's a lot of weird theories with this because no one really has a certain explanation. But again, there is a possibility that maybe Sam was an alien. And the final theory I want to talk about is that Sam was a ghost. Now, I find this one really interesting because the kids straight up asked Sam if he was a ghost, and he replied with, well, not really, but I am, in an odd sort of way. Now, the reason I find this is so weird is because, first off, it's a very strange response to give this question. That he really does kind of say, well, not exactly, but, I kind of am. He's kind of trying to give them a little bit of an answer as to what his nature might be. But another reason I think this is so weird is that the kids immediately went to him being a ghost. If we're going to believe the kids' encounter and everything that they saw, despite all of this happening, they still thought he was a ghost, so much so that they were willing to ask him if he was a ghost. And when they left to tell their story to the first person they saw, they also still described Sam as a ghost. So I think it's interesting that stuck out in their minds so much. If we're assuming the story is true, despite everything else that happened, this thing crawling out from under a bridge, it holding a book, it living in a metallic hut, it being 7 feet tall, despite all of that, the kids still were set on this thing being some sort of ghost. I do find it really interesting because, again, with all of their details, for it to be a ghost, or at least come to your mind first, and these kids to be there in first person, I think it's very interesting. And I also think the response Sam gives is interesting. Well, not really, but I am, in an odd sort of way. I'm not sure what that could really be alluded to. Maybe some sort of interdimensional being. Who knows, really? But again, I do think it's interesting. I think it could possibly explain away why the people around may not have seen him. Maybe that he wasn't visible from their angle because he was a ghost. I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of throwing some ideas out there. But I do find this one very interesting. I'm not going to say, again, it's the most likely, but I think the kid's story is something that we have to just look over. We have to talk about because I've never really heard a cryptid encounter this specific. Because even if this was the kid's imagination, they have a lot of really weird details in there. I mean, they have his height, which, okay, kids can think of someone very tall, but then all the facial features down to the 3 toes and the 3 fingers and the triangle shapes on his face, everything like that. It's very, very interesting, including the whole berry thing as well. So if I personally had to give a theory my vote, I guess, for being correct, I would probably vote for this to have been the kid's imagination. Now, I know that might not be the most exciting theory, and I don't want to say that the kids didn't see anything, because I think that if I had to choose something to believe from this story, I would probably go with the idea that the kids did see something or someone out there, and they just kind of took it from there. And that the reality is they probably saw something much more mundane, but they're kids. They're kids. They want to have fun with it. They have crazy imaginations. There's really no telling. That's what I would probably side with. But at the same time, if this really is what they saw, I mean, it's hard to really for people to believe them because they are kids. I mean, the sole, witnesses to this are kids that are, usually pretty untrustworthy when it comes to eyewitness testimonies, especially when they are this just fantastical and out there. I think the encounter is very interesting. I find it unfortunate we don't have any other encounters with Sam ever. He was never seen again. The hut was never found, never seen again. This is all a one-off thing, which is why personally I do think it must have been something to do with the kid's imagination. But if we're going to go that route, then maybe the kids didn't see anything physically real if it was never found. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to really go with off that, but I do think this story is very interesting, and I just had to talk about it, and I thought what better time than to do it for the first video on this channel. I have a lot of notes off this video from a specific website that I will link also in the description. The writer did a great job, so I recommend going and reading that too. But again, if you guys want to read this for yourselves, check out the website, check out the journal entries from this, and let me know down below what you guys think. Was Sam real? Was he a ghost? Was he an alien? Was he completely made up? Is this entire story just completely made up? Let me know down below. I would be very interested to hear all your guys' theories about this because, again, it is one of the weirdest cryptid encounters I've ever heard of. But there are some strange ones, and I do intend on covering those in the future. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to subscribe to the channel down below. It is free and takes just a second. I would appreciate all the support there. But thank you guys for watching. I do really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.